The Hampton estate stood wrapped in a heavy, respectful silence, broken only by the soft murmur of voices and the occasional clink of crystal glasses. It was the 40th day after Victor Holloway's death, the traditional Orthodox Remembrance Day when, according to ancient belief, the soul finally bids farewell to the earthly world and ascends. For Maya Holloway, however, it felt as though her own soul was the one preparing to depart, trailing after the man she had loved for 4 decades. The grand parlor was filled with people dressed in somber black, their faces etched with practiced sympathy. Lilies, Maya's careful choice, dominated the floral arrangements, their sweet, almost cloying fragrance mingling with expensive perfumes and the faint trace of cigar smoke from the men who had stepped outside for a discreet puff. Everything was impeccable, as it always was in the Holloway home. The catering was exquisite. Trays of imported caviar en blini, délicat petit, hard cheeses, and artisanal chocolates, all products of sterling reserve. The luxury gourmet empire Victor had built from nothing into a global name synonymous with uncompromising quality. From the outside, Maya appeared the perfect grieving widow, poised in her elegant black dress, seated deeply in a velvet armchair, accepting condolences with quiet nods and faint smiles. But inside she felt detached, as if separated from the scene by an invisible pane of glass. She observed the ritual unfolding around her like a silent play, her emotions muffled and distant. People approached one by one, repeating the same phrases. Maya, stay strong. Victor was a great man. What a terrible loss. She thanked them, forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and watched as their gazes slid past her, seeing only the ornamental wife of a titan. For 40 years, Maya had been the unseen force behind Victor's success. While he negotiated deals and built the company's framework, she had woven the intricate social web that held it all together. Endless dinner parties orchestrated to perfection, linens chosen with care, glasses never empty, these were her domain. But beneath the surface glamour, it was Maya who spent hours on the phone with suppliers in Belgium, Sri Lanka, and France, not discussing contracts or prices, but lives, their children's milestones, their gardens, their joys and sorrows. Victor had called it the social glue. He would often say, with that twinkle in his eye, Maya, I build the walls, but you fill the house with life. Without you, it's just a stone box. Now the box felt emptier than ever. In her lap rested a slim, embossed leather folder, the only thing that felt truly real in this haze of blurred faces and hollow words. She hadn't let it out of her sight since the notary. An old family friend had handed it to her days earlier. This is Victor's final wish, he had said gravely. He asked that I give this to you personally, only after the official will has been read to the others. The official will had been straightforward and predictable. The sprawling Hampton estate, the Manhattan penthouse, the investment portfolios, all divided equally between Maya and their only son, Grant. The company, Sterling Reserve, was conspicuously absent from those documents. That was because everything pertaining to it was here, in this folder. Maya knew its contents by heart, though she had only opened it once in the notary's office. She hadn't dared look again. It felt too much like reading a future without Victor, while her heart still ached with fresh grief. 100% of the shares transferred to her sole ownership, his final, profound act of trust, his ultimate gift. Her fingers traced the folder's smooth surface absent-mindedly as whispers drifted to her, ears from near the fireplace. Poor Maya. How will she manage on her own now? Victor handled everything. She was, well, just his wife. The words didn't sting. They were simply the truth as the world saw it, and as her son apparently saw it too. Maya's gaze found Grant across the room. He wasn't grieving. Far from it. He stood at the center of a cluster of top executives, animated and gesturing with confident energy. A corporate smile played on his lips as he adjusted his tie and patted the shoulder of Arthur Vance, the chief financial officer and longtime family friend. There was an impatient eagerness in his movements, the anticipation of a man already trying on his father's throne. Victor's words echoed in her mind from a conversation in his study one evening. He has much of your drive, Maya, but little of your soul. He sees numbers, not people. I fear one day it will destroy him. Grant caught her staring, He excused himself from the group and headed toward her, Arthur trailing like a loyal shadow. "Mom!" He stopped in front of her, blocking the light from a tall floor lamp. His voice, so similar to Victor's in timbre, carried a new metallic edge she had never heard before. "We need to talk." Without waiting, he guided her toward the buffet table laden with the finest offerings from their company, the fruits of Victor's lifelong passion. "I've been thinking," Grant began casually, plucking a canapé topped with black caviar and popping it into his mouth without savoring it. "Starting tomorrow, I officially take over. So Dad's office is mine now. You'll need to clear out his personal effects and yours too from the estate. I plan to redecorate and host corporate receptions here. You understand? You won't be comfortable anymore. You'll move into the city penthouse. It's smaller, but it'll be enough for just you." He delivered this as if rearranging furniture, evicting her from the home where she had lived, loved and raised him for 40 years. Maya remained silent, a strange numbness spreading in her chest. Grant smirked, mistaking her quiet for acquiescence, the compliance of a weak, confused woman. "And another thing," he added, wiping his fingers on a napkin. His gaze appraised her with open disdain. "You'll have a pension, don't worry. But sitting idle isn't good at your age. You need to stay engaged." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper laced with venom. "Your place now? Well, you can start by tidying up my office bathroom." The words froze the air around her. In that instant, something shifted deep within Maya, grief hardening into an icy resolve. The clinking glasses, voices, and scents faded. The world narrowed to her son's smug face and the cool leather folder in her lap. He hadn't just insulted her. On the day of his father's memorial, in the home Victor built, Grant had trampled his father's memory. He had devalued 40 years of partnership, love, and shared vision. Icy clarity flooded her veins. This was no longer her son standing before her, but a stranger threatening everything she and Victor held sacred. Without a word, Maya turned and walked away, ascending the stairs to the master suite. She closed the door on the noise below, waiting in silence until the last guest departed. Only then did she descend to Victor's study, the heart of their home. The room still carried his scent, sandalwood and fine tobacco. His half-empty teacup sat on the desk. She sank into his oversized leather armchair, memories flooding her. Sterling Reserve wasn't just a business. It was their mutual child, born of passion for quality and tradition. Victor hadn't built a machine. He had built a family, extending to artisans worldwide, bound by honor and personal bonds. Grant's words echoed, "Your place is cleaning my office bathroom." They provoked no tears, only cold curiosity. How could he, raised in this world, devalue it so completely? Her first instinct wasn't lawyers or confrontation. Revealing the will would be too easy, his language of documents and power. It wouldn't touch his soul. Instead, she reached for her personal journal, her spiderweb of contacts, filled with personal numbers cultivated over decades. Victor had teased her about it. "You've woven your web around half the world, Maya. Our partners hold on through your threads, not steal contracts." Now she would test those threads. Opening to D, she dialed Charlotte. Dubois in Brussels, a dear friend and owner of a legendary chocolate factory. The call connected. Charlotte's warm, raspy voice filled the line with genuine sympathy. After brief condolences, Maya said quietly, "We have changes coming. Grant is taking the reins." A pause. "I understand," Charlotte replied seriously. "You can always count on me." The first thread held. Maya made 2 more calls, to Mr. Sundaram in Sri Lanka and Monsieur Laurent in France. Each responded with unwavering loyalty to the old ways, to Victor and Maya. Closing the journal as dawn light touched the bookshelves, Maya felt power in the silence. She had made her first move, not as a humiliated widow, but as the true owner of Sterling Reserve. The war for the company's soul had begun. The morning after the memorial, the Sterling Reserve headquarters in Manhattan stood bathed in crisp winter sunlight, its elegant facade of glass and old brick reflecting the quiet dignity that had always defined the company. Inside, the air carried the familiar, comforting aromas of Ceylon tea brewing in the lobby, hints of rich Belgian chocolate from the tasting room, and the polished scent of aged wood paneling. To most employees, it was simply the smell of home. To Grant Holloway, arriving precisely at 9 o'clock in his tailored charcoal suit, It was merely the scent of money waiting to be maximized. He strode through the revolving doors with the confident gait of a conqueror, nodding curtly to the security guard who had worked there for 25 years, Miss Davis, Victor's longtime secretary, now in Grant's mind. His secretary waited at the reception desk, her eyes red-rimmed from quiet tears shed in private. She had been with the company since its earliest days, when Victor and Maya were still running operations out of a small warehouse in Brooklyn. "Mr. Grant Holloway," she said softly, stepping forward, "please accept my deepest condolences. Your father was—" "Thank you, Ms. Davis," Grant interrupted, already moving toward the private elevator. "Black coffee, no sugar, and send Vance in as soon as he arrives." He didn't wait for her reply. The elevator doors closed on her stunned expression. On the top floor, Grant pushed open the heavy oak doors to what had been his father's office. Now his. The room was exactly as Victor had left it. Towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes on gastronomy, art, and history. A massive antique desk facing floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. And on the wall behind the desk, a large oil portrait of Victor Holloway, painted 10 years earlier. In it, Victor gazed out with calm wisdom, a faint knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as though he understood secrets the viewer could only guess at. Grant barely glanced at the portrait. He crossed the room in long strides, lifted the heavy frame off its hook, and propped it face to the wall in a forgotten corner, as if it were obsolete furniture. Dust motes danced in the light where the painting had hung. From his briefcase he produced a sleek, glossy photograph of himself, taken only last year for a business magazine feature. Young, sharp, predatory smile, eyes looking somewhere above the heads of mere mortals. He hung it in the exact spot his father's portrait had occupied. The difference was jarring, warmth replaced by cold ambition. He sat in the oversized leather chair, his father's chair, and found it too large, too enveloping. But he didn't care. He rubbed his hands together, surveying his new kingdom. Arthur Vance entered moments later, slightly hunched as always, carrying a tablet and a folder thick with reports. His face wore its usual mask of deferential loyalty, but his eyes flicked quickly to the new portrait, then to the corner where Victor's painting leaned forgotten. "Grant, Mr. Holloway," Arthur corrected himself smoothly, closing the door. "Congratulations. You are in your rightful place. Victor would be proud." "Spare me the sentiment, Arthur," Grant said, leaning back. His voice carried that new metallic edge Maya had noticed the day before. Dad was a genius, no question, but his methods were outdated. Personal relationships, endless courtesies, honor. That's 20th century thinking. We're in the 21st century now. Time to clean house. Time to optimize. Arthur nodded eagerly, pulling up a chair opposite the desk. "Absolutely. I've been saying the same in private for years. Procurement costs are killing us. Those legacy suppliers have had us over a barrel for decades." Grant's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. I've reviewed the reports. They hide behind fairy tales, handmade this, family tradition that. Centuries of craftsmanship. Enough. We're paying premium for nostalgia." He paused, letting the silence build dramatically. "First order of new management," he declared. "We squeeze them, immediately." Arthur leaned forward. "How aggressive are we going?" "Very." Grant's smile was thin and sharp. "You'll draft a standard email to all key suppliers. Charlotte Dubois in Brussels, Sundaram in Sri Lanka, Laurent in France, the usual dinosaurs. Short and clear. Due to change in leadership and new commercial policy, we require an immediate 20% reduction in purchasing prices across the board. New terms effective now. No negotiation. They accept, or we find alternatives. No one is irreplaceable." Arthur hesitated for the briefest moment, almost imperceptible. "Grant, these aren't typical vendors. They're family operations. Victor spent years cultivating—" Grant laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "He bought their loyalty with our money. And let's be honest, my mother did most of the hand-holding. All those tea parties, phone calls about grandkids, Christmas hampers. How many billable hours wasted? How much inefficiency?" His tone dripped with the same disdain he had shown Maya at the memorial. "She's a sentimental old woman, Arthur. Surrounded herself with the same relics. She thinks friendships pay dividends. But you and I know better. The world runs on money, hard, cold cash." Arthur studied Grant's face, saw the unyielding certainty there, and allowed a slow, conspiratorial smile to spread across his own. "You're right," he said smoothly. It's time to shake up this sleepy kingdom. I'll prepare the draft immediately. Perfect. Send it today. Grant stood, walking to the window and gazing out over the park as if already counting future profits. Enough watching my mother play solitaire at the estate and mourn the past. We're building the future. He was wrong about one thing. Maya wasn't playing solitaire. Miles away at the Hampton estate, Maya was in the conservatory, carefully repotting Victor's favorite orchids. Her hands moved with practiced calm, cleaning roots, preparing fresh soil. The measured rhythm soothed her. She had slept little, but the icy clarity from the night before remained. She knew exactly what Grant and Arthur would do today. She had seen the hunger in her son's eyes, the calculation in Arthur's, and she had prepared the ground. Back in the office, Arthur returned within the hour with the drafted email. Grant read it once, nodded approval, and hit send all himself. The message flew out to Brussels. Sri Lanka, France, and beyond, a terse, impersonal demand that landed like a slap across decades of trust. They leaned back, satisfied, imagining complaints, then capitulation. In their world, silence would mean consent. They had no idea they had just ignited their own downfall. That afternoon, Grant and Arthur shared a celebratory cognac in the newly claimed office. The portrait of young Grant stared down approvingly. "See?" Grant said, swirling the amber liquid. "No immediate backlash. They're already calculating how much they need us. They'll fold." Arthur raised his glass. "To the new era." But across the Atlantic, in a small Brussels workshop smelling of cocoa and vanilla, Charlotte Dubois read the email and felt her blood turn to ice. She forwarded it immediately to Maya with a single line. "Is this real?" Maya's reply was brief. "Yes, and there is more you need to know. But not yet." In Sri Lanka, Mr. Sundaram read the message during evening tea on his veranda overlooking the plantations. He set the phone down without a word, his face grave. Within hours, he was on calls with old contacts. In France, Monsieur Laurent read it in his caviar aging room, surrounded by stainless steel tanks. He muttered a single poetic curse, then picked up his phone. By nightfall, the invisible web Maya had woven for 40 years was humming with quiet, furious energy. No one replied to Grant's email. No one called to complain. No one negotiated. There was only silence, the most devastating verdict in their world. Grant interpreted it as victory. "Told you," he said to Arthur the next morning. "They're scared. Good." Arthur, less certain but unwilling to show doubt, agreed. Meanwhile, Maya continued her careful work in the garden and conservatory. She trimmed roses, repotted orchids, and waited. The ice in her chest had begun to warm, not into hope, but into absolute certainty. Her spiderweb was holding, and soon it would become a net. Late that second night, Charlotte called from Brussels. "May," she said, voice trembling with restrained rage. "This letter from your son, it is not business. It is an insult. After 35 years. After everything." "I know, Charlotte," Maya replied quietly. "I am so sorry you had to see it." "I am not sorry, I am furious. I have already drafted termination of all shipments. My chocolate will never again appear in Sterling Reserve stores while—" She stopped abruptly. "But that is not why I am calling. Something worse happened an hour ago." Maya's heart stilled. "Tell me." "I received an inquiry from the legal department of Omnicorp." Charlotte's voice was now deadly calm. "They are in final stages of acquiring Sterling Reserve. They wish to confirm that my exclusive contract would remain in force after the change of ownership." The phone nearly slipped from Maya's hand. Omnicorp, Victor's greatest enemy, the soulless conglomerate that bought beloved brands, stripped their essence and sold cheap imitations under historic names. Victor had called them gravediggers of quality. And now, Grant and Arthur were selling his life's work to them. Everything clicked into place. The haste, the cruelty, the 20% demand, not greed alone. But pre-sale grooming, they were polishing numbers to make the company more attractive before slaughter. Arthur had been in on it from the beginning, manipulating Grant's ambition for his own gain. Maya's grief, already encased in ice, now turned to tempered steel. This was no longer about inheritance or humiliation. This was desecration. "Charlotte," Maya said, voice steady as winter stone. "Do not respond officially yet. Do one thing for me. Tell everyone. Tell Sundaram, Lauren, all our mutual friends. Let them know what fate awaits the Sterling Reserve and their own legacies if this sale goes through." A long pause. Then Charlotte's voice, fierce with alliance. Consider it done. May, the gravediggers will not feast on this grave. Maya hung up and walked into the garden under starlight. She picked up her pruning shears and began trimming faded rose blooms. Each snip deliberate and precise, across oceans and continents. The alarm spread through the network of old friends, quiet, swift, unstoppable. The coup Grant thought he had, executed so brilliantly, had just triggered its own collapse, and the tide was already turning. The conference room on the 42nd floor of a gleaming Manhattan tower belonged to Omnicorp, a company whose very name evoked sterile efficiency and ruthless consolidation. The space was all sharp angles and cold glass, a long table of polished black marble, ergonomic chairs in anonymous gray, and a massive screen dominating one wall. No art adorned the walls, no warmth, no history, only charts, projections, and the faint hum of air conditioning. Grant Holloway stood at the head of the table, laser pointer in hand, delivering what he believed would be the performance of his career. Flanking him were 3 Omnicorp executives, interchangeable in their navy suits, white shirts, and expressionless faces. Their watches were identical, their smiles tight and professional. Their eyes held the flat, calculating gaze of men who saw the world as rows and columns in a spreadsheet. The screen behind Grant glowed with his meticulously prepared presentation. Slide after slide flipped past. Logistics optimization, projected profit growth, brand synergies, cost reduction, initiatives. He spoke with the polished confidence of a man who had rehearsed every inflection. As you can see, gentlemen, Grant said, pointing the red dot at a steep upward curve. After the proactive measures we've already implemented with our suppliers, we anticipate a 20% reduction in procurement costs as early as this quarter. This unlocks significant capital and positions. Sterling Reserve as a premium asset with exceptional upside potential. He paused for effect, expecting nods of admiration. The Omnicorp men offered only the slightest acknowledgement, barely perceptible tilts of the head. To them, this was routine. Another legacy brand ripe for absorption. Grant pressed on, undeterred. We're delivering more than just a company. We're handing you a finely tuned profit engine, backed by exclusive long-term contracts for the world's finest gourmet products. These contracts are our crown jewel, irreplaceable access to artisanal suppliers no competitor can match. His phone, face up on the table, vibrated once. The screen lit with Sam Jones, warehouse manager. Grant frowned, swiped to dismiss, and continued smoothly. Most importantly, our supplier relationships have been streamlined under new leadership. Resistance to modernization has been minimal. The phone vibrated again, insistent. Sam Jones. Irritation flashed across Grant's face. He dismissed the call a second time, flipping the phone face down with deliberate emphasis. One of the Omnicorp men raised an eyebrow a fraction, but said nothing. Grant opened his mouth for the grand finale, the closing pitch that would seal the multi-$100-million deal. He never got the words out. The conference room door burst open with a force that made the glass walls tremble. Sam Jones stood in the doorway, a weathered man in his 60s wearing a sterling Reserve work jacket stained with years of honest labor. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked utterly out of place in this sterile corporate arena, like a relic from another era. Mr. Holloway, Sam gasped, clutching the doorframe. Grant's face flushed crimson with fury and embarrassment. Sam Jones, are you insane? He hissed through clenched teeth. I'm in a critical meeting. Get out now! But Sam didn't hear him, or couldn't. The ships, he stammered, voice breaking. The ships! Grant rose halfway from his chair. What? All of them. Every single one. Sam's words tumbled out in a rush. The port just called. Notices came in from Brussels Ceylon, France, refusal of all shipments. Cargo halted. The vessel's already at sea. They're turning around. A deafening silence descended, thick and suffocating. Grant stood frozen, staring at the warehouse manager as if he'd spoken in tongues. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Behind him, the profit growth chart still blazed on the screen, a cruel, mocking prophecy. The Omnicorp executives exchanged glances, cool, detached, predatory. No surprise, no sympathy, only reassessment. One of them, the senior partner, slowly closed his laptop. The soft click echoed like a judge's gavel. It seems, he said in a flat, indifferent tone, addressing his colleagues rather than Grant, that the subject of negotiations has been exhausted. They rose in unison, gathering briefcases with mechanical precision. No handshakes, no parting words for Grant. They simply filed out, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and absolute dismissal. The deal, the foundation of Grant's entire vision, was built on one irreplaceable pillar: those exclusive supplier contracts. Without the authentic Belgian chocolate, the rare Ceylon teas, the legendary French caviar, Sterling Reserve was just a pretty name on an empty shelf, a hollow brand ready to be filled with mass-produced substitutes. And now, that pillar had crumbled in spectacular public fashion. Grant remained standing amid the ruins of his triumph, alone except for the bewildered Sam Jones, who muttered apologies and backed out of the room. Humiliation burned through him, complete, witnessed, irreversible. Back at the Hampton estate, Maya was in the rose garden under a clear winter sky. The air was crisp, carrying the clean scent of evergreens and turned earth. She wore gardening gloves and held her favorite pruning shears, methodically clipping spent blooms from the bushes. Each precise cut allowed new growth to flourish. The work grounded her, gave her clarity. She had not heard the details of the meeting, but she didn't need to. She knew exactly how the day would unfold for her son and Arthur. Her phone rang. Brussels, Charlotte. Maya answered, continuing to prune as she listened. "It has begun," Charlotte said without greeting, her voice tight with restrained satisfaction. "All shipments suspended. No explanations given. Just formal termination notices. Sundram and Lauren have done the same. The others will follow within hours." Maya clipped a faded burgundy rose and placed it gently in her basket. "Thank you, Charlotte." "No, May. Thank you for warning us. Omnicorp..." That would have been the end of everything we all built. Our names, our family's work, sold to those butchers. A pause. "How are you holding up?" Maya gazed at the bare branches she had just cleared. "I am exactly where I need to be." They spoke briefly of small things, weather, gardens, mutual friends, before hanging up. Maya knew the next phase would come soon. Anger, blame, confrontation. She was ready. By late afternoon, the estate's peace was shattered. First came the furious screech of tires. On the gravel drive, a sound alien to this serene place. Then car doors slammed with violent force. Heavy footsteps crunched rapidly toward the garden terrace. Grant's voice echoed through the open French doors of the house. "Mom, where are you?" Maya did not respond. She calmly snipped another dead bloom from a black baccara rose, deep, velvety, almost black, and laid it in the basket. Moments later, they appeared on the garden path. Grant and Arthur, disheveled and wild-eyed. Grant's jacket hung open, tie askew, hair tousled as if he'd been raking his hands through it. His face was a mask of rage and despair. Arthur trailed a step behind, struggling to maintain composure, but his darting eyes and pallid skin betrayed panic. They stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. Their aggressive energy clashed with the garden's tranquility like a storm, front-meeting calm air. "Mom, what did you do?" Grant shouted, voice cracking. "What did you tell them?" Maya straightened slowly, turning to face him. Her expression was serene, cold pity in her eyes. "What are you talking about, Grant?" "Don't pretend!" He exploded, waving his arms. "The suppliers, all of them, canceled. Contracts torn up. Shipments stopped. The Omnicorp deal is dead. You called them. You ruined everything!" Arthur placed a restraining hand on Grant's shoulder, more for his own support than calm. "Miss Holloway," he began in his oily, ingratiating tone, now laced with desperation. "We are in an extremely serious situation. The company is effectively paralyzed." Mr. Holloway spoke hastily. "But he is correct. We know you've been in contact with our key partners. We ask, no, we demand that you call them immediately and resolve this misunderstanding. You must fix this." The word demand hung in the air, absurd coming from a man suddenly cornered. Maya shifted her gaze from her son's fury to Arthur's false urgency, then back to the rosebush. With deliberate calm, she clipped another faded flower. The sharp snip of the shears cut through the tension like a blade. "I didn't call them to cancel anything. Grant," she said quietly, her voice carrying effortlessly through the garden. "I called them as a friend to say goodbye." Grant blinked, confusion momentarily overriding rage. "Say goodbye? What are you talking about? This is business. You don't understand any of it. You ruined everything with your sentimentality. It is you who never understood, Maya replied, placing the shears in the basket and facing them fully. Neither of you. You thought your father's company was buildings, warehouses, reports, and numbers. But it is people. It is trust built over 40 years. Trust you destroyed in 2 days. That's a lie, Grant screamed. They'd never throw away millions over some emotional nonsense. You poisoned them against me. You slandered me. Maya inhaled the clean, rose-scented air. I only told them the truth, she said, meeting first Grant's eyes, then Arthur's, that you disrespected them with your ultimatum, and that you were planning to sell their life's work, along with your father's legacy, to Omnicorp. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Grant froze, fury draining into shock. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Arthur's mask shattered completely. Beneath it was raw terror, the face of a man watching his carefully laid plans implode. His jaw slackened, eyes glazing with the realization that their deepest secret had been exposed. They stood rooted amid blooming roses, suffocating in the lie they had woven. Arthur recovered first, fear sharpening his instincts. He switched tactics instantly, voice shifting to urgent concern. Miss Holloway, thank God you know, he exclaimed, stepping forward and partially shielding Grant. We didn't want to worry you until it was finalized. You don't understand the full picture. Yes, we were in discussions with Omnicorp, but it was the only way to save the company. Victor left. Significant challenges, debts, cash flow issues, outdated contracts. Bankruptcy was imminent. Blatant lies, delivered with desperate conviction. Grant, hearing the lifeline, grasped it. Yes, Arthur's right, Mom. Dad hid problems from us. We were trying to fix everything quietly, then tell you. Now it's ruined, but it's not too late. Arthur seized the moment, pulling documents from his folder and thrusting them toward Maya. Here, sign this now. It's a power of attorney giving Grant emergency authority to act for all owners. We can still revive the Omnicorp deal. If you don't sign, the company declares bankruptcy tomorrow. You'll destroy everything your husband built. Blackmail wrapped in fabricated panic, preying on her supposed ignorance. Her guilt, her grief. They still saw her as the weak, sentimental widow who could be bullied into submission. Maya didn't glance at the papers. She set her basket on the garden bench, then reached inside and withdrew the slim, embossed leather folder she had carried since the memorial. You're speaking of these papers, Arthur? She asked softly. They stared, uncomprehending. To them, it was just another relic from her sentimental world. Maya stepped forward. They instinctively retreated. She stopped before Arthur and extended the folder. Take it, read it. Arthur hesitated, suspicion warring with curiosity. Finally he took it, hands trembling as he opened it. Grant leaned in. Maya watched their faces as Arthur scanned the first lines, confusion, then deeper reading, eyes widening, breath catching, color fleeing until his skin was gray ash. The folder nearly fell. Grant snatched it, devouring the text. The document was brief, 2 pages. Victor Holloway's final codicil, 100% of sterling. Reserve shares transferred upon his death to the sole ownership of his wife, Maya Holloway. Signed, witnessed, notarized, irrevocable. Silence, absolute and crushing. Their world collapsed. Maya gently took the folder from Grant's limp hands. My place, she said calmly, looking directly at her son, is not cleaning your office bathroom. My place is at the head of the table where your father made decisions. The same table where you and this man planned to betray his memory. She paused, letting the words settle. You are both fired, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to remove your personal belongings from my office. By evening, I want you off my property. Get off my land. She turned back to the roses, dismissing them without another glance. Behind her, a choked gasp, perhaps a sob. Then frantic footsteps retreating over gravel. Car doors slammed. Engines roared. Tires spun, spraying gravel as they fled. Then silence returned, clean, pure, restored. Maya picked up the shattered orchid pot she had dropped days earlier. The roots were still viable. She would repot it. It would bloom again, stronger. The tide had crashed. The false empire lay in ruins. And Maya stood unbroken amid the garden she had nurtured for decades. Quietly. Victorious. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Sterling Reserve. Headquarters, casting long golden beams across the polished oak floors and the rich, Persian rugs that Victor had chosen decades ago. For the first time in over 20 years, Maya Holloway arrived not as the supportive wife accompanying her husband, nor as a quiet visitor dropping off homemade treats for the staff, but as the rightful owner and chief executive officer. She stepped out of the private elevator onto the executive floor wearing a tailored navy suit, elegant, understated, and commanding in its simplicity. In her hand, she carried only the slim, embossed leather folder and a small bouquet of fresh roses cut from the estate garden that dawn. The building seemed to greet her differently today. The familiar scents of brewing, Ceylon tea and faint traces of Belgian chocolate lingered in the air, but now they felt like a respectful welcome rather than mere background comfort. Ms. Davis waited at the reception desk, her eyes still red from the emotional whirlwind of the past days, but bright with unmistakable relief. When she saw Maya, she stepped forward without hesitation, took Maya's coat, and hung it with the same care she had once reserved for Victor. "Welcome, Mrs. Holloway," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "It's good to have the heart of the company back where it belongs." Maya placed a gentle hand on the older woman's arm. "Thank you, Margaret. From today it's Maya, and we have work to do." The first destination was the office that had, for 2 disastrous days, belonged to her son. Maya pushed open the heavy oak doors and paused on the threshold. Grant's glossy, arrogant portrait still hung behind the desk, glaring down with that predatory smile. Victor's oil painting remained propped face to the wall in the corner, gathering dust. Maya crossed the room without a word. She lifted Grant's photograph from its hook, handed it to Ms. Davis, waiting behind her, and said simply, "Dispose of this, please." Then she walked to the corner, gently lifted Victor's portrait, and wiped the light film of dust from the frame with her bare hand. His eyes, wise, warm, with that familiar twinkle, met hers. For a moment, she felt the weight of his approval settle over her like a protective mantle. She hung the painting herself, centering it perfectly on the wall where it had always belonged. The soul of the office had returned home. Within the hour, Maya summoned the senior leadership, team, and the company's longtime legal counsel to the boardroom. No grand announcements, no dramatic flourishes. She simply took her place at the head of the long mahogany table, the very table where Victor had made countless decisions, and laid the leather folder open before her. "As of today," she said, her voice calm and steady, "pursuant to the final codicil of my husband's will, I am assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Reserve. All directives, orders, and communications issued by Grant, Holloway in the past, 48 hours are hereby nullified." She slid copies of the document across the table. No one spoke, no one questioned. She saw only quiet nods and, in many eyes, visible relief. The room had been holding its breath for days, waiting for sanity to return. That same afternoon, 2 letters left Maya's desk. The first was addressed to the legal department of Omnicorp. It was short, formal, and icy in its precision. "Be advised that Sterling Reserve, Inc. is not engaging in, and will never engage in merger or acquisition discussions with Omnicorp or any of its subsidiaries. Any further attempts at contact will be regarded as hostile action and dealt with accordingly." The second letter went to the company's outside counsel. Instructions to initiate a full investigation into the recent activities of former Chief Financial Officer Arthur Vance, with particular attention to potential fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempted material damage to the company. Criminal referral would follow if warranted. The machinery of justice began to turn. But Maya knew that restoring balance required more than legal documents and firings. It required healing. For the first time in 2 decades, she packed a small overnight bag and booked a flight, not to accompany Victor on business, but to travel alone on behalf of the company she now led. Her destination, Brussels. Charlotte Dubois met her at the airport herself. Waving aside drivers and protocol, the 2 women embraced like sisters long parted, tears mingling with quiet laughter in the arrivals hall. They spent the evening in a small, centuries-old restaurant near the Grand Place, its walls adorned with faded tapestries and warmed by a crackling fireplace. The air was rich with the scents of waffles drifting in from the street, dark chocolate, and aged Burgundy wine. They spoke of everything except business at first. Victor's quirks, their children, the gardens they both loved, how swiftly 40 years had passed. Only toward the end of the meal, As dessert plates were cleared, did Charlotte reach across the table and take Maya's hand. "Victor would be so proud of you, May," she said, eyes shining. "You didn't just save a company. You saved our shared history. All of us, Sundaram, Lauren. The others, we were ready to walk away forever to protect what we built together. But you gave us a reason to stay." Maya squeezed her hand in return. "We protected it together, Charlotte. And now we rebuild, stronger." Over the following weeks, Maya traveled quietly to Sri Lanka and to the French coast. She walked the tea plantations with Mr. Sundaram under vast green canopies, listening to stories of his father and Victor's father striking their first deals on handshakes. She stood in Monsieur Laurent's caviar aging rooms, inhaling the briny poetry of his craft, and assured him that nothing, not one tradition, would be compromised under her leadership. Contracts were renewed, not with new demands or discounts, but with quiet reaffirmation of mutual respect. Shipments resumed. Shelves in Sterling Reserve stores began to fill again with the authentic products that had defined the brand for generations. Winter melted into spring, then into summer. One warm July afternoon, the tasting room at headquarters, a sunlit space, with a massive oak table, at its center was filled with laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. It was not a board meeting, but a celebration. Around the table sat the people who formed the true backbone of Sterling Reserve: Charlotte Dubois, freshly arrived from Brussels; Mr. Sundaram, beaming in a light linen suit; Monsieur Laurent, elegant as ever; and representatives from other long-time suppliers across Europe and Asia. They had all come for the launch of something new. In the center of the table stood rows of small, elegant glass jars, pear confiture, slow-cooked to perfection, blending the delicate sweetness of Belgian pears with subtle notes of Ceylon cinnamon and a whisper of French brandy. Maya's own recipe, the first product she had personally developed. She lifted one jar, warm from the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "We will call it the Charlotte," she announced, turning to her friend with a smile, "in honor of true partnership, in honor of friendships that have proven stronger than any contract and more valuable than any sum of money." Charlotte's eyes filled instantly. Applause broke out around the table, warm, genuine, heartfelt. Maya looked at the faces surrounding her, weathered hands that had crafted masterpieces for generations, eyes that understood quality as a sacred trust, voices that spoke of tradition with reverence. For the first time since Victor's death, she felt not merely peace but a deep, quiet joy. She had saved her husband's legacy, but more than that, she had begun to create her own. The company's soul had not only been preserved, it had been renewed. Under her leadership, Sterling Reserve would continue to stand for uncompromising excellence, for human connections over cold transactions, for honor over expediency. Later that evening, alone in the office that was now truly hers, Maya stood before Victor's portrait. The late summer light painted the room in soft gold. She spoke aloud, though no one else was there to hear. "I kept our promise, my love. The walls you built are still standing, and the house, I've filled it with life again." In the quiet, she almost felt his smile widen. Months turned to a year. The investigation into Arthur Vance concluded with charges filed: fraud, embezzlement attempts, breach of duty. He settled quietly out of court, disappearing into obscurity with whatever remained of his reputation. Grant was another matter. Maya heard fragments through mutual acquaintances. A failed startup, mounting debts, a life unraveling in the harsh light of consequences he had never anticipated. She did not reach out. Not yet, perhaps not ever. The wound he had inflicted, on her, on Victor's memory, on everything they had built, was too deep, too deliberate. Some bridges, once burned with such arrogance, could not be rebuilt. Yet on quiet evenings in the Hampton garden, as she tended the roses that had witnessed her triumph, Maya sometimes wondered, was there only cold justice in her final banishment of her only child? Or had maternal resentment played its part? She had no easy answer. What she did know was this: she had protected what mattered most. The company thrived as never before, profitable, respected, true to its roots while gently evolving. Employees spoke of a new energy, a sense of family restored. Customers returned in greater numbers, drawn by the authenticity that mass-market imitators could never replicate. Maya Holloway was no longer seen as just the wife. She was the guardian of a legacy and its quiet, formidable architect. One autumn day, walking through the conservatory, where Victor's orchids still bloomed magnificently, Maya paused before the tea sapling Mr. Sundaram had gifted them 25 years earlier. It had grown into a sturdy bush, its leaves glossy and vibrant. She touched a leaf gently. Some things, nurtured with care and defended with courage, endured. And some things, allowed to wither through neglect or malice, could never be forced back to life. Maya had chosen endurance. She had chosen honor, and in that choice, she had found not only victory, but freedom. The legacy was secure. The new bloom had begun. Autumn had fully claimed the Hampton estate by the time Maya Holloway allowed herself a moment of true pause. The rose garden, once the silent witness to her greatest confrontation, now glowed with the deep reds and golds of late-blooming varieties. The air carried the crisp bite of coming winter, mingled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the faint sweetness of the last hardy blooms. She walked the gravel path slowly, pruning shears in hand, but today she clipped nothing. She simply touched the petals, feeling their fragile strength, and let her thoughts wander further than they had in months. A year had passed since the day she had stood in this very garden and banished her only son and Arthur Vance from her life and from the company. 12 months since the suppliers' revolt had collapsed Grant's hasty empire. 12 months since she had taken her rightful place at the head of Sterling Reserve and begun steering it into a future that honored Victor's vision while gently imprinting her own. The company had not merely survived, it had flourished. Sales were at record highs, driven not by aggressive cost-cutting or mass-market expansion, but by renewed customer loyalty to authentic quality. New boutique stores had opened in London and Tokyo, each designed with the warmth of old-world elegance rather than sterile minimalism. The Charlotte pear confiture had become a bestseller, spawning an entire line of collaborative preserves bearing the names of her oldest partners. The Sundaram spiced mango chutney, the Lauren sea-salted caramel with caviar essence. Critics raved, customers queued. The press, once ready to eulogize Sterling Reserve as another victim of corporate consolidation, now wrote glowing profiles about the quiet revolution led by the widow who had saved a legacy. Maya had been featured on the cover of a prestigious business magazine under the headline, The Invisible Architect, How Maya Holloway Proved That Soul Outlasts Spreadsheets. She had granted only one interview, speaking softly about partnership, tradition, and the irreplaceable value of human trust. The article had gone viral in certain circles. Young entrepreneurs wrote to her asking for advice. Older ones sent notes of admiration, confessing they had underestimated her for decades. All of it should have felt like triumph. And yet on quiet evenings like this, a hollow ache persisted beneath the satisfaction. She sat on the stone bench near the black baccara. Roses, the same bush she had been pruning the day Grant arrived in fury. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. In the distance, the estate's lights began to glow warmly from the windows. Inside, staff prepared dinner. Outside, only the wind whispered through the branches. Victor's voice seemed to linger in that wind sometimes. She could almost hear him. "You did what had to be done, my love. You protected what we built." But another voice, her own, deeper and more troubled, asked the question she had avoided for a year. At what cost? Grant, her only child. She had not heard from him directly since that day in the garden. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. Through discreet inquiries made not out of surveillance but quiet concern, she had learned fragments of his life. The startup he launched, with the last of his personal funds, had collapsed within months. Investors, spooked by rumors of the Sterling Reserve scandal, pulled out. Arthur Vance, facing his own legal troubles, had distanced himself entirely, leaving Grant to shoulder the blame alone in certain circles. There were whispers of mounting debts, of a small apartment in Brooklyn, of jobs taken and lost. Some said he had left New York altogether. Others claimed he was seen at industry events, networking desperately, his once confident smile now strained and brittle. Maya had not intervened. She had not offered help, financial or otherwise. She told herself it was justice. He had chosen greed and betrayal over family and honor. He had to face the consequences of his actions. Just as she had taught him, though, ironically, he had never truly listened to her teachings. But in the deepest hours of the night, when sleep evaded her, She wondered if justice and maternal love could truly be separated so cleanly. Had she banished him out of righteous fury, or had resentment played its part? Resentment for the cruel words at the memorial. "Your place is cleaning my office bathroom." Words that had stripped her of dignity in front of the world she had helped build. Resentment for his eagerness to evict her from the only home she had known for 40 years. Resentment for his willingness to sell Victor's life's work to the very forces her husband had despised. Or was it simply fear? Fear that if she forgave too soon, the lesson would be lost. That the company, the legacy, the soul of everything they had created would remain vulnerable to the next ambitious predator. Wearing a familiar face? She had no simple answer. One afternoon in late October, an unmarked envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper, expensive stationery. Grant had favored in better days. The handwriting was unmistakably his, though shakier than she remembered. "Mom, I don't expect you to read this, let alone respond. I know what I did. I know what I said. I know I betrayed everything Dad stood for. And you. I thought I was building something bigger. I thought sentiment was weakness. I thought cutting corners and maximizing profit was strength. I was wrong. About everything. I've spent the last year watching from the outside as you turned the company into something even greater than Dad imagined. I see the articles. I see the new products. I see the way people speak about you now. With real respect. Not the patronizing kind they used to reserve for Victor's wife. I'm proud of you. And I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or money or a way back in. I know I don't deserve any of it. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what Dad meant when he said the company wasn't a machine. It was a family. And I destroyed my place in that family. I'm leaving New York, starting over somewhere else. Maybe one day I'll earn the right to call myself your son again. Maybe not. I'm sorry. Grant?" Maya read the letter 3 times in the conservatory, surrounded by Victor's orchids and the tea sapling that had grown strong and tall. Tears came, silent, unexpected. Not the torrents of grief that had marked the early days after Victor's death, but something quieter, more complex. Regret, relief, sorrow, pride, love. All of it intertwined. She did not reply immediately. She carried the letter with her for days, folded in her pocket as she walked the gardens, as she chaired board meetings, as she tasted new blends in the tasting room. Finally, on a cold November evening, she sat at Victor's old desk, the one now hers, and wrote back on the same heavy stationery they had always used for personal correspondence. "Grant, I received your letter. I've read it many times. You broke my heart that day in the garden, not because you lost the company, but because I saw that you had lost yourself. The son I raised valued honor. The man who stood before me that day did not. But I believe people can find their way back to who they were meant to be. Your father believed it too. He saw your flaws, but he never stopped believing in your potential. I am not ready to invite you home. The wounds are still tender, but I am ready to say this. The door is not bolted forever. Live honestly, work hard, treat people with the respect you once dismissed as weakness. Prove to yourself first that you understand what was truly lost. When you have done that for long enough to trust it is real, write again. Until then, know that I carry you in my heart, even when it hurts. Mom." She sealed the envelope, addressed it to the post office box number he had included, and mailed it herself the next morning. No immediate reply came. She did not expect one. Winter arrived fully, blanketing the estate in snow. The company prepared for the holiday season, hampers filled with the finest products, sent not just to customers but to every supplier family as tokens of enduring partnership. Maya hosted a small gathering at the estate on Christmas Eve. Charlotte, Sundaram, Lauren, and a few others who could travel. They sat by the great fireplace, drank mulled wine spiced with Ceylon cinnamon, and told stories of Victor, of deals sealed with laughter, of friendships that spanned oceans and generations. Laughter filled the house again, genuine, warm, unforced. As the clock struck midnight, Maya stepped outside onto the terrace. Snow fell softly, muffling the world. She looked up at the stars, bright and cold in the clear winter sky. Victor had once said, "The true measure of a life isn't what we build, Maya, it's what we choose not to destroy." She had protected what mattered most, the company, the legacy, the web of human connections that made Sterling Reserve more than commerce, But she had also preserved something deeper, the capacity to forgive. Even when justice demanded distance, the willingness to leave a door unbolted, even when pain advised otherwise. Honor, she had learned, was not always cold. Sometimes it required the courage to remain open to redemption. The snow continued to fall, covering the garden in a pristine blanket. Beneath it, the roses slept, roots deep and strong, waiting for spring. Maya turned back toward the warm light spilling from the house. The story of Sterling Reserve, of Victor and Maya Holloway, was not ended. It was evolving, and in its evolution, there was room for new growth, even from scarred earth, even from broken bonds, even from quiet, resilient hope.